Celtics Beat is brought to you by Ice Picks.
Well, it dates back to May 12th of 2025. Nearly 300 days of waiting, 42 and a half weeks. Incredible anticipation from talking heads across the globe and beyond. And we, the three of us, sat here all the way back in September and screamed at you, March 4th, March 4th, March 4th. That's going to be the day that Jayson Tatum returns. As luck would have it, or not have it, depending on how you look at it, we were off by just one game. One game. Jayson Tatum is back, and my goodness, was it a refreshing sight. With Sean Grande, Evan Valenti, I'm Adam Kaufman. Welcome in. Celtics Beat. You can always find us, of course, by rate, review, subscribing to the audio portion wherever you get your podcasts, or, of course, on the CLNS Media page across YouTube and the All Access page, this podcast, among other great Celtics podcasts. But this one right here is the only one that can offer you the perspective of the man who has for so long narrated Boston Celtics seasons and has been waiting probably with even more anticipation than the two of us for this moment to finally arrive. And Sean, I want to go backwards. I want to memento this thing. I want to go in reverse order. When you had your short walk back home from the Garden after this game on Friday night, what were the emotions after the fact? Seeing Jayson Tatum not only return, but flirt with a triple-double and play almost 30 minutes in his first meaningful basketball action in, again, about 10 months.
I was thinking about seeing him take that last seat on the bench and realizing what I said, in real time, which is usually turns out to be your true feeling, right? What you say in the moment. And it was a night full of extraordinary emotions and a crazy roller coaster. It was a metaphor for his rehab in so many ways. The entire night was, but it ended with every emotion that was in the building at the start. The one it ended with was relief. Relief that it was over, relief that he had played well, relief that he had bounced back from the 0-for-6 start, relief that he had fit in. Look at the box score. It looks like every other box score for the Celtics this year. It was just Jayson Tatum playing some of those minutes. And I think just to have it behind us, because I think, and I know not a lot of voices of specific teams would bring this up, but, Max and I marched to the beat of our own, iPod shuffle. I think it was becoming a distraction. It was getting bigger and bigger and more uncomfortable as we were moving past the dates we thought it was going to be. And I think I remember just thinking to myself the other night, let's just get it over with. You're cleared. Get out there, play. And I think the biggest hurdle, as I've said in a lot of these conversations, just like this one, that what concerned me the most in the ramp up was Jayson Tatum saying, I want to be 100% when I come back, and his people leaking out. Jayson wants to be 100% when he comes back, knowing full well then he's never coming back because he was never going to be 100% on the first night. This is the last step of the rehab, and it's going to take some time for him to become Jayson Tatum again. You're going to see glimpses just like tonight, and eventually you will get there. But the emotion right now, relief. At the start of the day, you know what it was? It occurred to me today, just, on my run today, we didn't get a Christmas game for the first time in a decade. Today felt like Christmas. Walking in and just seeing the smiles and knowing what you were going to unwrap when the night was over. So I thought that was a nice little poetic part of tonight.
I actually want to go back to the word leak that you used, because I will just forever be impressed, and I don't even know what the word is. I am in awe of the fact that during the Brad Stevens regime, things just don't leak, whether it's his own contract extensions, whether it's rumblings surrounding a move.
About him getting hired.
Well, or even
last story ever broken by press release.
Right.
I remember that day.
Like even something as simple as it wasn't Shams, or it wasn't, some other, it wasn't Chris Haynes, it wasn't Ramona Shelburne, it wasn't Gary Washburn or Adam Himmelsbach. Nobody had the Jayson Tatum is playing tonight before the Celtics themselves on Twitter upgraded him from the usual out that we had seen for the first, 3 quarters of the season to questionable. The Celtics had it first, which is exactly how I wanted it to be. Does it mean anything? No, it doesn't. But I wanted that. I didn't even want Tatum himself to announce it in some sort of a Twitter post. I wanted it to follow the typical protocols of the Celtics. Jayson Tatum, questionable. And then it was Jayson Tatum, available. And all of that was under the Celtics' watch. And I am impressed that they operate so securely with such a tight-knit circle in that front office.
Did J.R. Smith have it? I didn't check his Twitter. And I think this was, listen, from a PR standpoint, when the 30 for 30 is written about this whole episode, PR is an interesting thing in the 2026 NBA because guys have their own. By the way, look at what just happened. The biggest PR disaster you had in the last couple of weeks, sports-wise, was the men's team, right? And that crazy FaceTime call, and it was super light. And what happened was...
Funny, I thought you were going to say it was the Jayson Tatum weekly documentary.
Yeah, the weekly
That's not that big of a deal.
Everybody is... It was the total thing is like 14 minutes long, and people are treating it like it's the last...
Thank you.
Thing. I mean, it's a docu-series. They're going to... Jason
has to come back. That's an episode. It wasn't a big deal.
Jason has to come back when the game's on NBC, right? NBC didn't drop the Dallas OKC game because Cooper Flagg wasn't playing. It was a bad game and nobody would watch for a much sexier Celtics-Sixer game. That wasn't the reason, right? They happened to know the magical date. And my new favorite one the last couple of days was the 314 is the St. Louis area code, and 314 is the amount of Jason's last contract. And there was 314 on the clock when he got the ball before he got hurt, left in the game in New York. Like, how much time did people have on their hands? But the PR stuff is interesting now because I referenced the hockey team because all of a sudden you had a PR disaster and then there was no national team anymore. Everybody flew back to their own teams with their own PR directors and their own players, especially at the level of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and guys like that. They have their own team of people that produce docuseries and are going to leak information and are going to fight Carmelo Anthony on Twitter and all of these things that go on. So it's complicated to keep it tight and keep stories like that, in close. And I think when Jayson I think it was in Detroit when the video caught him practicing or doing stuff, when things like that leaked out, it was a problem and an issue. And you saw what happened when Joe got asked questions that he wasn't ready to answer. And but again, that's part of the relief, right? That's all behind us. And now we can worry about what really matters. Wasn't tonight for Jayson Tatum. It's what happens in game 2 and game 5 and game 8. And where is he going to be going backwards like Memento from the start of training camp next year? The playoffs, I just hope people don't lose track of the fact that this is still an underdog playing with house money. Don't stop talking like the Celtics are now the favorites to win the championship because you might have 80% of Jayson Tatum. The expectations, I promise everybody, those heavy expectations which make things not enjoyable, they're coming back next year. You'll have them at the start of next year, I promise. So why not if you're a Celtic fan, why not let the Knicks collapse under the weight of that? Why not let the Pistons collapse under the weight of their 8-game lead? Why not let the Cavs and James Harden, when they find out what he's about in the 7th game, let them deal with the weight of it and be what you are, which is a live underdog in your parlance, playing with house money that could really do some damage here if things break right.
There are about 17 or so things that we need to get to before we worry about game 2, game 5, game 18, whatever, as you alluded to before. And Ev, I apologize. I know I'm hogging this, but I got one more thing that you had mentioned, Sean, that you kind of slid in there and I don't want to let it go. You said that this thing internally could have become annoying, could have become a distraction, maybe even was, and they had to get this thing going a little bit. And you said, come on, you're cleared. How long ago do you think, in theory, Jayson Tatum could have returned, medically speaking, before whatever mental, emotional, psychological thing was delaying him until March 6th?
I think, by the way, it's in addition to mental and all the other psychological, there's also logistical, how many games left, when is it? The question that never got answered, which I thought was a really good one at some point, I forget who asked it in one of the gaggles, was, is there a drop dead date? At which point it's no longer useful to have him ramp up. Because remember, all of this, step backwards, all of this is in the context of the Celtics defying everything we know by being 20 games over 500. That was not supposed to happen when Jayson Tatum returned. When we all talked over the summer, Max and I fought about this before game 5 last year. The game after the injury, where I thought Tatum should come back this year, and he thought that he shouldn't. I didn't want Tatum to go 18 months without playing. I thought it was a bad idea, and it didn't matter to me. People at that time were saying, well, the Celtics, if they can be good and hang around, then Tatum comes back. This was never about what Tatum can do for this team this year. Anything you get is a bonus. To me, it's about him being physically, mentally, 100% and beyond opening day of training camp. All this now is going to be a bonus, whatever you get. That said, I think he would listen. We're all told different things. I'm not the authority to speak on it officially or unofficially, but could he have played before Friday night? Yeah, sure he could have. But everybody's got to get together and make the best decision on a variety of levels. Maybe I'm just bitter because in August I said it was March 4th, and I would have looked great, right? If it turned out to be Wednesday.
We talked about this all week.
Just so Friday. I'm sure.
Adam and I talked about this. We had the entire team on standby to, if he plays that Wednesday night against Charlotte, we had everybody. We had your clip queued up. There's a date, I'm just gonna call it
because remember when I said it. And listen, it was an educated. I was using timeline, finding a home game that made sense, that looked like it might be a good entry, whatever. And Kaufman over here was like, something. What could anybody have possibly known in August or September? He's like, you didn't just guess that. That wasn't a random.
I wasn't at the Garden for the post-game questioning of Jayson Tatum, but the question that I would love for someone to ask at some point that has not been asked of him post-playing, where he might divulge a little bit more than he was along the way. Way back at the beginning of all this, he said, yeah, I've got a goal. I've got a date in mind. And then as we got closer, he said, I don't have a goal. And he sort of backtracked off of that, which is fine because whatever it was logistically that slowed it down, to your point. But obviously way back when, he had a goal in mind. Now, whether that's the same goal that, you were thinking about and I was thinking about, or it was a totally different date, I have no idea. But I would love for someone to say, hey, by the way, you mentioned X number of months ago that there was a target date. Now that you're back, what was it? Because I would like to hear. I'd be curious.
I think when you think about, you're saying he didn't divulge stuff, you could make the case he divulged too much, like on the podcast that he did. And, because remember, I think what people didn't realize inside the bubble is the feeding frenzy that was waiting outside the bubble for any morsel of information. And when I walk home now from the Garden, there's all those gulls, all those birds are on the water. So I've started stealing some granola bars and things like that from the media room, and I feed them on the way home. It's just a little thing that I do. But it, now I think word's gotten out, right, in the bird community, and they're all waiting there. And you start to throw a granola bar and crunch it up and throw it out there, and all of a sudden it's there's hundreds of them. That's what it's been like here.
You're
waiting for
Jayson Tatum too.
Yeah, I use the analogy of, and because this is a true story, something that really happened to me with, my son's mother and I don't agree on anything, but one thing we agreed on 14 and a half years ago was let's not tell anybody that, about, the birth of the baby and whatever. We'll just tell everybody it's over and we're already home. And we told everyone, well, the baby's due in September. Well, what happened was my son was 3 weeks late. So it went into October. By the time you got past October 1st, everybody who knew, everybody's watching and waiting and calling and texting and whatever knew. Stealth is out the window. And so stealth is out the window here. And when Jayson did that podcast, giving very honest answers, as he always does, about his feelings and everything he went through. I think that's why I wanted Friday night to be a celebration of the first half of Jayson's career and the launch of the second half of his career, and not how does he fit in and what are the minutes going to be and all this other stuff. And it did come in a game. Ironically, the Celtics had to win. That was a must win Friday night when you look at the performance Wednesday and this death trip coming up that starts on Sunday. They had to win that game on Friday night. So that they checked, if Jayson checked all the boxes in his rehab to get back, if you want to say anything about Friday night, it checked all the boxes.
I want to get in that later because there's so much to talk about. I want to talk about preparing for Friday night's game, knowing that he's going to play. What's that like? What's it like trying to be the guy that has to frame all of this within the game happening right in front of you? Because obviously there's a game happening against a Dallas Mavericks team that's, clearly not having the best year. They have Cooper Flagg. He's having a great season. Rookie of the year. Great stuff. The entire state of Maine is basically in the Garden because he's here. His family, obviously, long life, long Celtics fans for a long time. How do you prepare for a game like this, knowing that the game itself probably is not the story at all? That the story is the rehabilitation of a top 5 player in the league. How do you set the stage so that, and then how do you set the stage where everybody feels like they got everything they need? They got the game, they got enough Tatum stuff, they got enough Cooper Flagg stuff to feel satisfied with the way everything went. Because I imagine Friday night was not easy for you, trying to figure out everything involved.
I don't know if it's easy is the right word. I think I'm here to tell stories about human beings and the course of this team. And I think it was the perfect night to step away from the talking head craziness and realize the human drama of this kid who had to go through this ordeal. And yes, Jayson Tatum makes a lot of money and he's a great player, whatever. He had his entire life. Everything he's put his life into was taken from him in 1 minute. And he had to come to grips with his basketball mortality. I always remember, I talked about this during a game on Friday night. Remember what happened in Jayson Tatum's first 5 minutes as an NBA player. Gordon Hayward. That happened in front of him, and he's had to live with that. I've sat next to a guy for 25 years who always says his recurring nightmare, and every player's nightmare, is walking into an arena and not walking out. And that he always lived with that, when he was playing. So I think it was reading the emotions on the face of Jayson Tatum. And for the people who couldn't see it, if I'm on, on the TV side, I'm doing it differently. If I'm on the radio side, as I was on Friday, you're just describing what I'm seeing in his body language, in his facials. When is he smiling? When is he nervous? When does he have relief? And what I talked to Joe about before the game, we covered basketball stuff and we got into it. But my first question to him was, I went back to Game 5 last year when Joe picked up. I saw Joe for the first time walking into the building, and I said, how's he doing? And I wasn't asking about his Achilles or his surgery or anything. I said, how is he doing? Because that was the concern. As I watched this extraordinary young man, I mean, the duality of Jalen and Jayson, so outrageously beyond their years. They embarrass all of us by the things they have done in their 20s. I've been fascinated by the duality of the two of them, that I think they each could have been the other if their lives had taken on a different turn. That I think Jayson looks at all the stuff Jalen has done off the court and looks and realizes that he could be that guy if things had gone differently. And I think Jalen looks at Jayson with the kids and having a young kid at 19 years old and watching Deuce grow up essentially in the locker room. So I've always been just completely engulfed by that. And Jalen was a guy we watched a lot too tonight, because that is the other part of the story. When we talk about the PR of it, I think when it's all said and done, could we as an organization have done maybe a little better? Probably. Could Jalen and Jayson done a little better? Probably. But none of it matters tonight, because the story was a guy we've all watched grow up get an important part of his life back. And that's what I wanted to talk to Joe about before, is how he feels watching someone that he loves get back to the top of the mountain after he was there for 8 years. And in one moment, as I think as the guy said who was calling it when it happened, in a New York minute, just got shoved off that mountain to the bottom. And all of a sudden, the worst part is when you're lying at the bottom of it and you're looking back up, knowing you have to how hard it is to climb back up on top of it. And that's just to play. Forget championships and what you do on the floor, just to get back into an NBA game. And for him to complete that exhausting climb that I would say we never see any of it, but that's why we have a docuseries. We will see a lot of it, and the emotional ups and downs. And that's what this job has become about, championships and conference finals, because the Celtics have been so good since we've been here. But for those of us that do national things, that I always wanted to be at some level a team broadcaster, because that's the beauty of being a team broadcaster, is telling the stories from the start of the season to the end. And then if you're lucky enough to be around for a longer period of time, you get to watch Paul Pierce become the man that he became during his time here. And you get to watch a night like tonight, which isn't about tonight. It's about 10 months that came before it. and all the emotions and everything he had to overcome just to get here. So, and people say, is it hard? It's probably harder in real time to react to something like the injury, which you could completely, how do you call an injury that comes like that out of nowhere versus tonight? I remember saying at the time, when he comes back, whatever that day is, it's going to be a special night at the Garden. And it was, because fans here, legacy fans, understand everything I was just talking about. And they were there to meet that moment, as was the entire state of Maine, which apparently closed tonight. I don't know if the last person who left away to Boston just put the close sign, but I don't know what was going on in Maine today.
Turn out the lights, live free or die. That's New Hampshire. With the relief element, and obviously, most of us, unless you were in the building or, obviously doing what you do in describing all of it, most of us are watching it, whether it's in the form of clips going out on social media or you're watching the television broadcast. Even if you're synced up and listening to you at the same time, you're paying attention to want to see all of that you're describing in terms of the emotions on people's faces. And as we make our way through Jayson's night, which again was a tremendous night. He's plus 20, plays 27 minutes. There were all these questions about, is he going to be on a minutes restriction? Is he not? There was the pregame report that he wasn't going to. Plays the first 6 minutes of every quarter, plus a few at the end of the half to get him to that 27. Was able to not play most of that fourth quarter, or at least the last half of it, because obviously the game got out of hand on the way to a 20-point win for Boston, covering, by the way, for anyone who invested. But he finishes at 15, 12, and 7. Just an absurd box score, even flirting with a triple-double. He was 5, 5, and 5 at the break. But it didn't obviously start that way. He got a couple early assists, got a few early rebounds, but the shot was off, which is not a criticism. It was expected. He's short. There's air balls. He gets rejected by the rim on a dunk attempt. And until he gets that putback and he's hanging there on the rim with the one arm, the visual of just his face and just sort of sinking in, I'm on the board. Finally, it happened, because this wasn't even until the second quarter when this goes. And then obviously 30 seconds later, whatever it was, he comes back with the three-pointer. He's got the quick 5 before the half, and it's okay. He's starting to feel himself a little bit. Winds up hitting 6 out of his last 10 shots, and you get a really, not necessarily fill out the box score in the way that he typically does, but in terms of performance, you get a Jayson Tatum kind of caliber second half off of what he did at the end of that first half. And that, I have to imagine, in watching that unfold in real time, as it did for so many fans, as it did for those of us watching, really just kind of, it was a release. Like, I can only imagine how it felt for him being the one to go through it after the 10 months prior. But for just fans watching it, it was okay, this actually is going to look better than maybe we even realistically could have expected this quickly.
One of the great ironies is, first of all, that was a huge play in the game, because Dallas was up by 4 late in the first half. It looked like they had some momentum, because obviously there were a lot of empty possessions with Tatum and other guys, by the way. Look at Jalen and Peyton Pritchard Friday night. They also had this. They also struggled at the start and ended up having really good games. And like the entire season, a metaphor for it, Derek White was just solid and good the entire time, kind of carried them through it. It was such a typical night. But Jayson Tatum helped the Celtics out in so many of the areas they are deficient. But the one area where the Celtics have been elite all year is the one thing that Jayson Tatum doesn't do: offensive rebound. And irony of ironies, the biggest play of the night in many ways on a variety of levels is an offensive rebound he gets. He boxes out Cooper Flagg and gets that dunk. And I thought that was, how many nights have we seen over the years, Jayson Tatum? Tatum's got 13 rebounds, and they're like all defensive rebounds. So one thing he doesn't really do is crash. And ironically, the game turned in many ways on offensive rebound he got.
Which, by the way, was the only one he had of the dozen rebounds.
Yep. That's going to be what you're going to get. And it's just so funny. At the end of the night, it just turned into a typical gap year Celtics game. Vucevic gets hurt. And then Garza, who apparently has some sort of vendetta against the Dallas Mavericks, because he killed them in both games this year. That was the huge game he had down there when he was like 6 of 8, and he was 4 for 4 on threes in the game in Dallas. And he comes out of nowhere, not even expecting to play, does what he does. Ugo did it again. He made 2 plays again tonight that don't show up in box scores, that turn possessions around, and there were just so many different things that happened. I thought a really important thing that happened tonight was the second half that Peyton Pritchard had, because he was the one who had to turn the water off on Klay Thompson when Klay got super hot. Peyton was just chasing him around all over the place, and then still found time to get himself going after he had his 3 games in a row with the Garden, 2 scoreless games, unfathomable. And then he started 2 for 9 tonight, but he just kept grinding, doing what he does. Every time they throw an obstacle in front of him, he overcomes it. And I just thought this became a typical gap year Celtics game in which a lot of guys did a lot of different things. And again, you were fortunate. It wasn't Charlotte. It was Dallas on the second night of a late arrival back-to-back when they had played a tough game the night before. So obviously this game you're supposed to win is a game, as I said, the subtext of it was you had to win tonight. I keep saying, I don't want anyone to be scared about what's coming, but my goodness, it doesn't get any tougher than these next 3 games for the Celtics. So this became a game they certainly had to win if you're of the mind that you got to finish second or try. I personally think Boston, Cleveland, New York are going to be separated by a game or 2 when it comes down to the end. It's going to be a crazy 3-way dance to the end with those seedings. And I think you're probably better off with a first round matchup that avoids Charlotte. I'd rather have home court, not have home court in the second round and pick the team that you want to play, which is probably Toronto at this point. Who knows what Philly's going to look like with Embiid. The problem is the expectations are going to be so high. You're going to have home court in the first round of the playoffs. And that could be, if you get Charlotte or Philly, it could be a tough matchup in the first round. But again, we'll get there. When I just think that it was very quietly that no one was paying any attention because it was Tatum and Cooper Flag and bright lights, big city. That meanwhile, Celtics had to win on Friday night. They needed that.
Detroit first in the conference, 4 games in front of the now 42-21 Celtics. Then you have the Knicks, another game and a half back. The Cavaliers 3 off the C's in that 4th spot right now. And obviously we can continue to talk about that and this gauntlet of a trip that is in front, as Sean mentioned. Want to tell you, though, today's show is powered by Prize Picks. Shoot your shot on Prize Picks. Get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first for only $5. That's right. Prize Picks now giving you $50 in lineups when you sign up and play your first for $5. Prize Picks makes every dunk, every dime, every board that much more exciting, Ev. So do not miss this chance to get started on America's #1 app for sports picks.
Yeah, Prize Picks, simple to play, folks. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you cash in. Simple as that. Pick from your favorite sports: basketball, baseball, hockey, UFC, soccer, college, basketball, tennis, golf coming up, Masters, not that far away. So excited. Esports and more. And cough. The Flex Play Friday just remains undefeated because last week we gave out 3 stat projections. And the one that I was the most confident in was Onyeka Okongwu, more than 0.5 dunks. And guess what didn't hit on the Flex Play Friday was the more than less than Onyeka Okongwu dunks. I had more than 0.5. He didn't dunk the ball a single time in that game. I hit the other 2. No problem. It's just I just keep winning that same $21 that I have back every single time. So
that's good. Better losing.
Exactly. So I just keep winning. So with our Flex Play Friday and the Saturday, we're going to use Ant Edwards. We're going under 28.5 points versus the Magic. And that is a respect thing for the Magic defensively. It's really nothing other than that. I mean, Ants had a spectacular year. The Magic are just a tough defensive team. They usually hold teams to less than what they usually score. So we're going with that. We're going with Jalen Johnson second leg, more than 22.5 points versus Sixers. So Ant Edwards less than, Jalen Johnson more than. Then we're going to finish up Michael Porter Jr. This is a small number. I'm really I know it's the Pistons, so I know why it's low, but I'm going to stick with Michael Porter Jr. more than 19.5 points versus the Pistons. Pistons been an incredible story this season, no question about it, but I just think MPJ is going to put up a lot of shots. Whether he hits a bunch, we'll find out. If I hit all 3 at 3x money, 2 out of 3, give my money back. This has been the way I've lived my life this entire NFL, now NBA season. In a little as 50 minutes, you just watch it roll into your account. Super easy. I use Venmo. You can use your bank account, whether it's a debit card, whatever. It's super easy. And if your lineup's on fire, Prize Picks offers early payouts, Kaufman. Hasn't happened to me really that much yet, buddy, but there's still hope out there that I might be able to cash in early.
So download the Prize Picks app. Do it today. Use code CLNS. You get $50 in lineups after playing your first for only $5. That is code CLNS. $50 in lineups after playing your first for just $5. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Here with Sean Grande. Let's get back to this Tatum performance. I almost said this Celtics game. It's really, as we've talked about, it's not about the game, although the win was important. It's about the return and reemergence of Tatum. And, your expectations, mine, Evan's, anyone's going into the game, they don't really matter now. I think it's probably pretty safe to say he exceeded most everybody's, maybe not in particular categories. Like I invested in the over on his points at 12.5. He had 15. I'm not shocked by that. I thought he'd be looking for his shot and taking a whole bunch. The rebounds, clear area of need. So maybe a dozen was outside of what I expected from him, but I figured he'd be impactful there. And I figured he'd be facilitating and deferential to his teammates. So I'm not shocked by the 7 assists. The number that I think everyone should be at least a little bit surprised by, and to me is the most important number across his stat sheet, is again the 27 minutes. The fact that this guy was able to roll out and be impactful and play damn near 30 minutes in his first game, no training camp, no preseason, no ramp up outside of 5-on-5 practices with teammates in 10 months is really just fascinating to me. And he was asked, I think maybe by our own Bobby Manning after the game, about the plan for this upcoming trip, which again, we danced around it a little bit, at Cleveland, at San Antonio, at the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder. Incredibly difficult trip over the course of the next almost a week. And he didn't divulge anything in terms of whether he's playing in every game, 1 game, 2 games. He just said, yeah, we've got a plan. And, we'll all find out together, obviously, what that plan looks like. But again, that to me, just the availability and the performance tied into all of that, and the fact that you could reliably have him out there on the floor and even bring him back late in that second quarter to play just a little bit more before the half spoke volumes of what this guy's presence means.
Well, there is a minute restriction, first of all, and Joe was very cagey and didn't reveal it, and he was smart to do that, because if you announce something, it's why they say, well, he's on a 100 pitch limit. Is his arm going to fall off if he throws 101? I never understood that. And that's the danger. It's like when you say a player's going to be out 2 to 4 weeks. Now you've put like artificial limits on it. And, there is a minute restriction. The game restriction, we'll see what happens. I'm interested to see how this plays out, because it's not like you're going every 48 hours. The Sunday game, which, as you know, my lifelong affection for early morning games. Not only is it a 1:00 game, we have the time gods, weighing in with daylight savings time, which makes it even an hour earlier. So it's really a very early game on Sunday. So we'll see if Tatum turns around and plays in one that quickly. We'll see how does he feel on Saturday? How does he feel today? Who knows? Right. And that's going to determine a lot of what happens goes forward. When he plays 26 or 27 minutes, how does he feel the next day? That's the next step in the rehab that you have to get through. Unfortunately or unfortunately for the Celtics, the game that matters on the trip is the first one. Obviously, you have a road game in Cleveland. You've got to still have a road game in New York. These are the teams you're jockeying for position with down the stretch. So the biggest game by far is the Cleveland game on Sunday. And I was telling you guys off the air, it's so big that ABC is pulling the number 1 team, the Mike Breen team. They've been doing that Saturday night primetime game. They pulled them off that. And they're now doing the early game Sunday with the Celtics in Cleveland, largely because of Tatum and because it's a big game in the Eastern Conference.
What's wild is, Kaufman, you had your entire monologue. He was plus 20 in 27 minutes.
Plus 20.
I know.
It's like he never left. And we've talked briefly about Ugo.
I was going to say, what was Ugo? Ugo is just a plus 2.
I literally find Ugo fascinating. I think, I find that guy fascinating, and I'm so overwhelmed by the on-off splits.
You're enamored by Ugo.
Well, you know what's interesting, Evan?
It's ridiculous.
Evan, the Tatum on-off numbers was the baseline. I did a bit a couple of weeks ago. I did a bunch of different interviews before the season. Sometimes I try to box you into a win prediction, which I thought was really silly with this team. And I think, the number I came up with, flash back to the Philly game last week when we took the final break. And I said, when we come back to wrap it up, I'll take my bows too. So stay tuned for that. And when we came back, I said, listen, when I got boxed in before the season, I said, the Celtics are going to win 40 games. And they've won 40. So good for me for getting that right. Yeah, granted there were 22 left, but I didn't say anything about that. I just said they would win 40 games. But the baseline of that kind of generic grab a number out of thin air pick was the dirty little secret of the Tatum years. For 8 years here, when Jayson Tatum's been on the floor, the Celtics have been the equivalent of a 66-win team. And when he's been off the floor, they've been essentially a 42-win, 500 team. And that's with Brown, Porzingis, Holiday, Horford, Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Moore, everybody he's played with. So the baseline of me looking at the season is the group that the Celtics are now with this front court in October. We couldn't have imagined that have Keita and Minot and Garza and Tillman. How can that team possibly outperform the teams that Jayson Tatum has played with before? And that's where I thought they were going to struggle to be much over 500. And when people were saying they're going to win 45, 46 games, I remember saying, people were saying, well, opening night, you could beat Philadelphia. I'm like, so now we're just giving Keita, like he's going to outplay Embiid on opening night. And of course he did. And the story of the season, as the three of us love baseball so much, and we've all had baseball teams, right? From a kid. What do we do at this time of year in spring training? You look at your team with the craziest rose-colored glasses, and you say, well, if Meyer wins a Gold Glove at second base and get 20 home runs out of Durbin, and you figure out how to get the 4 outfielders in there, and Story stays healthy, and the pitching staff is this deep, and Chapman repeats that year, pretty soon you throw out 12 things, and you talk yourself into the World Series. But what do we know as sports fans? All of the ifs never all come true until the 2026 Celtics. Right. When if Jaylen Brown takes a step forward to become an MVP candidate, and if he stays healthy and Derek White stays healthy and Keita somehow becomes a top 10, top 12 center, and Shireman and Ugo Gonzalez and Jordan Walsh, even though they don't play, they shoot 42% from 3, and Garza becomes an offensive rebound. All of the things that you seem ridiculous in October, they all happened. And that's why you're in 21 games over 500.
That's why we've been talking about this a lot more recently. That's why we all really believe that Joe Mazzulla should win Coach of the Year, because
I don't know. And I feel like just talking to national people and whatever, you're getting that Bickerstaff feeling, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's best that Joe finishes second because it generally does not go well. That's like the
that's the death
trap, right? It's the Coach of the Year.
Means you're fired in the next couple of years.
Right. Mm-hmm. But to me, that's a little bit of a silly award. Not as silly as my personal favorite award in the NBA, as anyone who's been listening to it for years knows, is Coach of the Month. Because when Joe or Doc or any Brad has won Coach of the Month, I know I've got a freebie at the end of the show, which is, hey, you won Coach of the Month. Congratulations. Why were you coaching so poorly last month? What were you doing wrong? What did you improve on that made you a better coach this month? Like, to me, that's almost like Employee of the Month, right? It's a little bit silly. And congratulations on Derek White for winning an award that I had never heard of. Defensive player.
Are they in the Defensive Player of the Month?
I'm like, what on earth?
Never seen that.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I participation trophies are nice, but it's nice. It's just I literally had never heard of that particular award. But listen, Joe, he's done an extraordinary job. The entire staff has. It's a staff award. It's by definition it goes to a team that outperforms expectations, and who's outperformed expectations more than the Celtics this year. And do I hope for his sake he wins? Does he care? I mean, I think that
you would say no, but I believe he does.
Well, I think that Joe, if we flash back to the first year, I think Joe has held on to, as I would, as you would, as anybody would, Joe's probably held some receipts for some things that were said about him as a coach, the first year. And
Joe?
I've told this story before, so it's not out of school, but before game 4 of the conference finals in Miami, talking to Joe before we went on the air, I told him, listen, I just hope you have someone who cataloged everything that everybody said about you for the last 2 days, because you're going to want it one day. And, go back and look at what was coming down on Joe, who, again, history just seems to ignore the fact that he was thrown into an unprecedented, with the exception of Jack McKinney flying off his bike and Westhead taking over. And speaking of which, this is a diversion, I realize. But my God, how many seasons of great shows did Winning Time leave on the table by that show getting canceled? You had the Lakers win
the championship, which they must be upset about.
Which, as I said at the time, that's the most the Winning Time ending with Magic crying in the shower is the most on-brand thing for Red controlling things from beyond the grave of anything in history. But Winning Time you had Kobe and Shaq. You had the Lakers winning in the 80s. Then you got Kobe and Shaq, and now it's Succession. You've got family members not speaking to each other. I mean, the whole thing writes itself, and they stop it after 2. You had 8 more good seasons of Winning Time that they blew up. But anyway, going back to Westhead taking over for McKinney with the championship caliber team and high expectations out of nowhere. There's no historical precedent for Joe taking over a team that had to win a championship, and he had to win it with a staff that your life depends on your staff. They are your lifeblood. And they did, that assistant coaching staff did a great job. But remember, it's human nature. All those guys got passed over for Joe.
Yeah.
And now that it was just a brutal environment to try to win, and obviously came a game away from going back to the finals.
Well, and Stoudemire, right? That was the year that he even left partway through the season.
Left. I talk about this too. This is a super deep dive, but when that thing started to go south in the playoffs, it was after they took the 2-0 lead on Atlanta, and things got really bumpy after that. They got bumpy in the Philly series, and obviously go down 3-0 to Miami. What happened right after the Celtics took the 2-0 lead on Atlanta? Ime got the Houston job. Mm-hmm. So now you got guys in the staff. This isn't about undercutting the guy they work for. This is about, where are my kids going to go to school? Am I leaving to go with Ime? Am I not? So you got another grenade thrown into a team that already had several grenades thrown into them in that 22-23 season. They still had a really good year. They were following one of the most unappreciated teams. That second half, and we talked about the 2022 Celtics a lot the other night when Charlotte was here, because they're having that same year where they're under 500 halfway through, and now they look like the best team ever until they lost on Friday night. But that team was just, people forget. I think they were 28-7 with a +15 differential to end the year. And if it wasn't for Jalen and Jayson not being ready and handling the ball too much, and they had obviously a great chance to win the.
Steph Curry going nuclear.
Steph Curry went nuclear, and I think
Jordan Poole was good for a minute.
Yeah,
Jordan Poole was good.
What a minute!
The Celtics and Warriors played at the end of the year. It was a game Scal and I did on TV late in March. They played in San Francisco that year. And if you watched the game that night, first of all, you weren't thinking Golden State had a chance to get to the finals at that point. But if you watched that game that night in late March, you're like, there's no way Golden State could beat the Celtics 4 out of 7. That was the night that Marcus dove and hurt Kurt, like he dove for the loose ball, and Steph got hurt. And I expected that series, that NBA Finals, went exactly the way I thought it was going to go until the final 5 minutes of Game 4. It was dead on. I remember telling Bill Simmons before Game 1, he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Here's what's going to happen. It's going to be 2-1 Celtics, and then Game 4 will be that game that Golden State always wins, that Steph always wins. Celtics will find a way, and that's going to be the passing of the torch." And torch did not get passed.
Nope. My whole thing with Joe, and I don't want to have the conversation again because I think we just did this last week, so people have heard it. My whole thing with Joe and Coach of the Year, and am I going to lose sleep if Joe is not Coach of the Year? No, of course not. But in terms of just being deserving and overachieving and accomplishing all the things they have with the roster turnover they encountered and the young players that, Joe historically has not played and now groomed to where they look like, good, young, inexpensive pieces of the next iteration of championship Celtics, hopefully, is that if not now, when? Joe is never for the rest of his career going to have a more impressive coaching season than what he has been handed this year and what he has done with it. So it's just that's kind of the way I look at it, more so than a Bickerstaff or that kind of thing.
And remember, Detroit didn't have, obviously, I think the expectation game isn't won by Boston, but there weren't super high expectations on Detroit. Certainly nothing like this. People thought they were going to be good, but nobody thought they were going to be a 60-win team. And that's going to be part of it too. And by the way, we're having this conversation with a quarter of the season left. So how Tatum gets integrated here, that could play a factor in it. Does Detroit finish? Did the Celtics finish 4th, 12 games behind Detroit? Or do they finish 2nd, 3 games behind Detroit? That could make a difference in the stuff we're talking about now. It's like is Con Knipple, he moves slightly ahead of Cooper Flagg? Probably. But there's 20 games left. So it seems like we're at the end, but we're not, which is why you needed to get Tatum back now.
I am glad you brought up.
And Mitch Johnson has no shot, which is wild to me. Mitch Johnson is like hanging out over here. His team's like 45 and 17.
There's 7 or 8 guys every year that have done a great job. There's a lot of great coaches, but again, to me, it's a little bit silly because it's such a staff award and it's it takes a village. Just Jayson coming back to that. This is something we talked about. It takes a village. Jayson Tatum didn't rehab by himself. Jayson Tatum had medical staff working with him, and Nick Sang obviously was getting a lot of attention, and rightly so, and his teammates, and he was at every practice. The most remarkable thing about Jayson Tatum's season was the fact that he literally wore different outfits every game. I was like, dude, this is really impressive. That's the only reason I didn't want to see him come back. I wanted to see if he had 82 different,
Well, that's his thing. Hasn't he been doing that for years now?
Yeah, but it's usually, he's playing. So it's not, you don't see him sitting on the bench with it. I'm like, wow.
He's there. It's even more important when you're not playing.
Do they send this stuff to, when the team doesn't win the championship and they like send the hats and the I wonder, is that where all the Tatum outfits go after he wears them once? I don't know. But
I think this is like Abby Chin when she joins us talks about, people in her position will use like Rent the Runway. Like, I think that's what, like, Tatum's just getting these clothes to wear for one night and ship them back.
I have been with Abby we took a cab. We were both flying back, red eye, after a game in LA. So I'm not going to go into the details of Abby changing in the back of the cab to get the outfit off, because that's another topic for my, I'll save that for my book. But when you rent the runway, which she does, I always wonder, like, how does Abby have 82 different outfits? Because she does rent the runway, but she had to return the stuff. You mail it back.
Right.
So the goal was we get in the cab, and by the time we got to LAX, she had to have the outfit back in the package to mail from the airport. Right. And it was one of the most impressive things, I've ever seen. I
want to point out the late great Craig Sager for a second, who would change the buttons on his jackets so he never wore the same thing twice. And as a clothing guy, that is the pinnacle of trying to do it right. Tatum does 82. Well, not only that, you got to burn it. Whatever he wore, I forget what he wore to the KG press, the press interview we had with KG in the hallway, where he told Craig Sager to burn everything he wore. That, but Craig always was pretty particular about the buttons had to be different at least. So every outfit was different. So Craig Sager would approve of what Jayson Tatum was thrown out there the past.
League's a little emptier. League's a little emptier without that.
I feel that.
There's no doubt. It's been a fun year that way. It's funny. I talked about we haven't seen Mike Breen. I didn't think we were going to see my friend Mike Tirico much this year, and now he's like, every week he's going to be bouncing. We're going to see him Tuesday in San Antonio, and then among the other, we're talking about this brutal road gauntlet. Celtics still have home games to play. Charlotte comes back. You got another home game against Charlotte. OKC comes in, and then a monster game Sunday night basketball game against Minnesota is coming up too. So there's a lot of it's tough. It's why I think holding on a second is going to be
televised games in the remaining 19.
Oh, it's all of them this week. And you're on NBC Tuesday, and you're on Amazon Thursday, and this is what happens. And this is the beauty of this season. We had no right to expect to have all of these nights. The Sixer game there was buzz in the building on Sunday night. It felt big, and it felt big because the Sunday night guys were there. How about Max? Max got a nice Mike Tirico shout out during that game, doing the 81 stuff. But obviously NBC. I feel bad for a lot of my guys at TNT because it seems like everyone's, oh my God, NBC is the greatest thing ever, and people are kind of after the fact saying things about Turner, which was, a part of the lifeblood of the NBA for the past generation. And it's a shame. But NBC they've done an amazing job. No question.
Well, especially the throwback broadcast the other night with all the mid-90s stuff going on. But I do want to think
with Costas.
Yeah, Costas, Gray, Collins was there, the czar Mike Fratello, Hannah Storm was a part of it. The old graphics. I mean, I was eating that stuff up as someone there.
Bob opening. Was that for you? The Crosby, Stills, and Nash, but not Young.
Ooh,
reference at the start. I was like, okay, it's nostalgia, and there's nostalgia. By the way, speaking of Bob Costas, who was the voice of the St. Louis Spirits in the 70s, is a random shout out for no reason.
Sure.
You got to check out the ABA documentary on Amazon. It's awesome. Yeah, it's really, really good. It's like it's a longer runway when you could do it on an Amazon Prime or something like that, where you can have like 4 episodes.
Yeah.
It's the league was so under the radar, the NBA was in the late 70s, and if the NBA was under the radar, the ABA was way under the radar. And it's such an important part of what the game became. Like there were even players I
watched Jackie Moon in the Flint Tropics and
the Flint Tropics
that way.
Unfortunately, yeah, a lot of people just know the ABA from Jackie Moon. I'm like, it's not,
What was that? There was that clip of Dr. J recently of talking about how Red came up to him and said, "You should have been a Celtic."
Yeah,
like, you should have been a Celtic.
Yeah,
it's like, draft. He was playing at UMass. He was playing on the street.
Right.
It's like he was right there. He was unbelievable at UMass. And like you go back, if you as someone who lives in Western Mass goes back to UMass Amherst for things, it's like it's so far beyond what Dr. J and then Marcus Camby was later on down the road. Yeah. Like there's just I'm not trying to speak ill will of Frank Martin, who is a great coach and what they're trying to do, but it's just not the same thing anymore. Their hockey team is great. But
that's amazing that they won national. Jonathan Quick still playing in the league.
I was there. I watched Jonathan Quick.
Wow, look at Evan Pop for Jonathan Quick. Jeez.
I'll never forget this in my life. My friend who is a hockey goalie for our local high school team brought me to my first hockey game ever. It was Jonathan Quick, UMass versus BC. It was like 8-4. It was a white-on-nine at UMass. And he goes to me, "Hey, the guy in between the pipes for us, like he's pretty good. He's been drafted by the Kings. He's going to be really good." I was like, "Okay." And Jonathan Quick stood on his head for the entire night. He was unbelievable in this game. The only reason why UMass beat BC was because Jonathan Quick was basically the best goalie you've ever seen in your life for the entire duration of this game.
Stanley Cup run that he was
ridiculous. The first game I ever saw in my life, Jonathan Quick was the goalie, and I remember leaving the Mullen Center that night and being like, "This guy's going to be the next big thing." And then he gets to LA, and I'm like, "This guy's going to be great." And then he wins a couple of Stanley Cups, and I'm like, "I knew it the whole time. And that's like one of the greatest things in life, right? When you're a sports fan, when you can predict the next superstar, when you're like, "Oh, I was in." At the ground level, I was there when he was here, and now he's here. I was here when he was here.
Here's one thing that I know.
It's too bad they don't have that on Prize Picks.
I know, right?
I know that if listeners of this program in the YouTube comment section are going to get mad at me for talking about Drake May, they sure as hell don't give a shit about UMass hockey and Jonathan Quick. That much I'm certain of. So I'm going to bring.
I have an even better one, just like that, which actually ties into an NBA thing we were just talking about, and I'm going to watch it tied into Vucevic when it's all said and done. So when I was, I don't know if I was in high school or going into college, whatever, a friend of mine was a college roommate of a comedian named Elon Gold, who ended up having a pretty good career. He did some stuff like you can Google him and find him. He had a solid career, and he was inviting me out in New York to a Saturday Night Live showcase because Elon was one of the comedians, and we wanted to come out there. Everybody laugh really hard and clap and try to get him some attention. So the SNL scouts and the night goes on. There's one comedian after the other, and Elon Gold comes out and he's great and he kills, and we're laughing and we're clapping or wherever. I'm like, man, he may have this. And then there was one more comedian to come on afterwards. And his name was Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
And I was there the night of the SNL showcase. I'm like, uh-oh. I'm not sure he's going to get it. And the rest of the and Adam Sandler, New Hampshire guy, huge NBA fan. And I was talking about the movie Uncut Gems recently. I was trying to make the point about how people have been getting on Vucevic a little bit because he had some up and down games. And like, first of all, Vucevic at 35 years old is not supposed to be playing 5 games in 7 nights. Back-to-back at altitude against Jokic, and then a brutal travel back-to-back against Giannis. And I was trying to make the point about how long Vucevic has been around, that go back to 2012 in that Uncut Gems series, which was the Kevin Garnett series against Philadelphia that went 7 games. You know who was a rookie who played in that series? Vucevic. Played for Philadelphia in that 2012.
Fresh out of the USC.
And here I thought you were going to shout out Hustle and the Brad cameo and Hernan Gomez being the star of the movie.
Hernan Gomez. I remember seeing that movie going, I wonder if Anthony Edwards can play, because this kid is a star. He is a star. If he can play, he's going to be the next big thing. And of course, He was. He just
Sure.
like jumped off the screen in that movie.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
All right, so going back to the C's for a second here, and there's been a little bit of you weren't probably paying attention to any of this stuff, but on social media, certainly on like post-game commentary after the Celtics game, a lot of mockery of how the Jays going to coexist. How's this going to work? Because obviously it has been a conversation. But Ev, you're shaking your head, but I think for the wrong reasons. There are
that's some mind reading right there.
There are reasons that you could look at and say, like, yeah, like, of course it was going to work. These guys have played together for damn near a decade. And they won a championship together. They know how to play together. Like, no kidding. But I do think it, where it gets lost a little bit, some of these people scoffing at the notion that there isn't, and will be an element of trying to navigate this a little bit with a not 100% run the offense through him, Jayson Tatum. We've talked about that a lot on this show for weeks, months, Ev, I think. And the post-game interviews with, Tatum was up there at the podium, and for him, it was just a lot of relief and gratitude and excitement and happy to be back and all of that, and talking about that more than anything else, as you would expect. Brown was, in his scrum, and, they kind of got to hey, I'm really excited to have Jayson back, and he's my friend. I'm rooting for him, and I've had a front row seat to all of this, and oh my God, this is amazing. Like, they got to that. But where Brown started was, yeah, we got to figure this out a little bit, because tonight, for me, in my role, was a little bit clunky. Not his exact word, but that was the notion. It was a little different than it has been. And that wasn't him complaining. It wasn't him saying this isn't going to work or they can't play together or any of that. But it was him acknowledging, okay, we've been doing something a certain way for 3/4 of the season, and now we got to do something a different way that should ultimately make us even better. But there's a little path that we need to follow to get ourselves there. And so all of the like mocking how are these guys going to work together, at a very superficial level, I thought was kind of dumb, honestly, because there is an element of this that they need to figure out.
There usually is an element of truth or something that matters in it. And then we, in our society, have the tendency to blow up that little morsel of stuff that matters and blow it up into some craziness about how they don't get along and whatever, and this isn't going to work and blah, blah, blah. And I feel strongly, I have a strong memory of being on a duck boat a couple of years ago. I remember my son was there next to me and there were a lot of people.
I remember watching
I seem to remember that happening. So I'm not concerned about it. But of course, from a clunky state, it was clunky. The first quarter, and by the way, it got less clunky as the game went on, as he became more comfortable. And of course it's going to be clunky because on the one hand, it's a player who's been with them all year long and has been in every practice and has been to every game and in a different outfit every time. But on the other hand, it is an element of a player you're adding to the roster that there is no practice time. That's what I don't think I was scoffing at was Jayson Tatum's been secretly practicing with the Celtics. No, he hasn't. You know why? Because they don't practice. There's no time to practice once you get into the season. You're playing every other day. The Celtics are in this run right now where they're playing like 20 games in 35 days or 36 days. We just did 6 games in 9 days in all 4 time zones. Like you're not supposed that line from City Slickers, like the man ate bacon at every meal. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. So there's no practices. There's no time for this kind of stuff. So you're going to have to do it on the fly. You're going to have to do it with film study. You're going to have to do it all the while. And this is what Jayson was concerned about when he didn't want to come back at 70% and tough because you're at 70%. All that said, I would say this about Jalen. He has deserved all the flowers he's gotten this year. And if it seems like he has been going around telling everybody this is my favorite year that I've ever had and my teammates have been great, and it's because here's a guy who has been cast in the role of Robin for the last 8 years, all the while thinking, all the while knowing, all the while believing that he could be Batman. And you know what he's been this year? Batman. And he's done it great. So I had no problem with it. You want to go back to the PR conversation we had earlier? If I had control over time and space and I was dictating it, I have used the Jordan analogy 30 years ago, coming back from baseball a few times, and I hesitate because in our society now, he said Tatum is Jordan. He's comparing Tatum to Jordan. I'm not saying he's Jordan or that he's the Beatles or he's Jesus or better than Jesus or whatever John Lennon said. I'm not saying any of that. I'm using the situation comparing Scottie Pippen to Jaylen Brown, where he had that year and a half when he was the guy and the Bulls were playing great and Pippen was playing great. There was one moment in a nationally televised game when Jordan's return was becoming imminent, and they cut to Pippen on the bench, and he points down to his sneakers with the Jumpman logo on it, and he says, come back, we need you. One little moment like that from Jaylen might have quelled. I don't think my point is that earlier, Jaylen, Jayson, organization, all of us, we complained about the talking heads talking about Jaylen and Jayson and how this is all going to work. I think we could have done more to quell it, and nobody did. There's a docuseries and everybody's got their own issues to worry about. So I think the discussion, what I'm getting at, is that it's fair. Of course it's fair. And of course it's going to continue. And what if the Celtics play fairly well but lose these 3 games, which is very possible, on the road trip, and then suddenly they're 1-3 since Jayson Tatum came back after a 41-21 start. So the situation is fraught with potential peril, with the difficult schedule the rest of the way. I just think inside the room, I think they both know that to win again, they need each other, and that they're both great individually, but together, again, I just remember being on a duck boat. I feel like it happened. So therefore, it happened because of the two of them and how they had played together for 8 years. So the notion
I keep going back to that clip that I think NBC Sports Boston had, and the two of them, they're sitting in the chairs together. They're the director's chairs, and Jaylen looks at Jayson and goes, "You want to win?" And Jayson goes, "Yeah." He goes, "He wants to win. I want to win. We're good." There's been a significant part of these two guys' career of pitting them against each other. Of like, oh, is it like they can't coexist and they can't do this, can't do that, can't do this. You and us have been a part of the they can, they will, they'll figure it out. They did. They won a title. You're on a duck boat. I don't worry about them because this season to me it's what it is. It's Jaylen figuring out that he can do X, Y, and Z. It's Jayson getting back to himself. It's integrating Jordan Walsh and Baylor Shireman and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. It's a whole bunch of things. People now, like Nick Wright, is like, they're going to win the title. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Come on. Now you're putting ridiculous pressure on this team that just got this guy back literally 35
that's
seconds.
The same dude. I love Nick Wright, but that's the same dude who had a very unique idea for the All-Star game.
We've talked about that plenty on this show.
We talked about it with Max. We brought it up. We brought it up. He wasn't.
I did too. You got to be comfortable with your place in this world we're in now to suggest that. So I have full marks. Full marks.
All I said was Pritchard's got to be on the team. Pritchard's got to be on the white team. I said Pritchard's got to be on the white team if we're going to do that, but I'm not going there. But he brought up
you just did, dude. He wants to just put the whole roster up.
He's ready to build up the roster.
On the screen.
I'm ready. I just think that guy's ready to go. But Nick was like, "Oh, they're going to win.
It's going to be out of control."
I'm picking the Celtics to win the championship, and I was like, "That's just ridiculous. That's insane. That's insane to do." Well,
but listen, in terms of the betting odds, they are at least the favorites to come out of the East.
Yeah,
now, come on. I think that's a little silly too. But everything's the projections all get based on scoring differential. And the Celtics, to me, even more impressive than the record is this absurd statistical profile that they put together where they started the night second in differential, second in net rating. Are you serious? I don't even know where to start. Second in net rating, fourth in rebounding after the first week they have when it looked like they weren't going to get a rebound all year, and they were a top 5 rebounding team. Mm-hmm. They were a top 5 defensive team until the Charlotte game the other night. The fact that they lose Tatum, Porzingis, Horford, and Cornette, and they've maintained the offensive pace from last year, one of the elite offensive teams in NBA history. People are like, yeah, but everybody's up there. This is this great offensive era. Well, they're still fit, but they're the best one of that group. They're still second in the league to Denver this year. It's It's just one absurdity after the other.
I always put them in the title. That's my, that's just like the. I think they're projecting on this team of like, oh, they're going to add Tatum back and now they're going to win the title. I'm like, no, like just
you're not adding Tatum back from. I understand the legend will be that Tatum was under the knife having the surgery before the ball came back in bounds, right? Because they got him across town to New York and he had the surgery. But the one thing he is not going to be is Jayson Tatum last night. He's not going to be Jayson Tatum tomorrow in Cleveland. It's going to take a while. But the point is 70% of Jayson Tatum better than what you were getting in those minutes and more dangerous than what you were getting in those minutes? And what the Celtics are is a scary as hell live underdog to scare the teams that really are the contenders. And by the way, this notion that the West is this unbelievably deep. The East has got some good teams in it. You still have Philadelphia, Charlotte hanging around the middle. The East is getting overlooked here and dogged because it's easy copy. Are the best two teams Oklahoma City and San Antonio? Absolutely. But Denver is flawed. Jokic is amazing, but he doesn't look like the same Jokic from the last couple of years. The Lakers, needless to say, can't stop anybody from scoring. Phoenix has got significant injuries. That middle of the West is not that good. So this idea that it's going to be this now Minnesota, how Boston has a better record than Minnesota is beyond me. But you're still going to have, in Houston the second half of the year, ever since the Kevin Durant burner account, where we wandered into the building tonight. Yeah. We wandered into the building tonight. You knew something was going on with Houston when the Celtics won that ridiculous game on the back-to-back, and they blew out the Rockets, and Ime got kicked out, and Şengün got kicked out, and Durant was barking at the bench. You knew sometimes in this league you end up in somebody else's soap opera. And the Celtics certainly did that night. But suddenly this big, scary, dominant West doesn't look that way. And you look like you have four really good teams at the top of the East and some live teams on the bottom there with Charlotte and Philly, and Miami beat Charlotte tonight. I just don't, who wants to see Miami again? It was just like, it feels like every year we go to Miami for the playoffs. So there's one scenario unfolding. I brought this up the other night where you could have a rerun of last year with Orlando in the first round and New York in the second. That's starting to come into play.
Taking the Knicks out would be incredibly poetic, though, on the way to whatever happens.
It'd be scary as hell
on the show in months past.
But think of the weight of the expectations. And this is the thing about enjoying this year.
All the pressure would be on New York.
All of the pressure. And I don't say they've collapsed under it. They've had a really good year. But I'd ask you this. They've had a really good year, the Knicks have. You think it's been fun? Think it's been nearly as much fun as the Celtics have had this year? No. Because now you fired the coach, weight of expectations. When they lose a game, suddenly it's like the Celtics the last couple of years. How dare they lose a game? And it's not as much fun. And so when you get to the end of the championship, as that dude who was calling it said, the only way to live up to absurd, ridiculous expectations, you only have one choice. You have to meet them. And that's what the Celtics did in 2024. So enjoy. I promise you, October 1st, you're going to see the Celtics back up among the favorites and whatever. So enjoy the time that the weight is on Cleveland and James Harden having to win a seventh game. It's on Detroit because they're going to win 60 games. And it's on New York because it's New York. And by the way, as someone who grew up there, bombarded with the chants of 1940, tortured by my friends who were Islander fans, as I grew up a diehard New York Ranger fan in New York, when the Rangers had gotten to 40, 45 years, eventually on their way to 54 without winning the Stanley Cup. This is now 53 for the Knicks. So next year is the 54th year, which is what the Rangers were when they finally won the Cup. And you don't think of it, but here we are. It's 1973. So the weight that is on the Knicks here. And by the way, the Celtics will be back next year. The Pacers could get Halliburton and Debanza, right? Next year. We don't know how this is going to play out. And by the way, let me make another prediction now. You can play back since our March 4th didn't work out. Let's say the Celtics have this amazing year, win 53 games, losing game 7 of the second round, incredible gap year. You're going to have some people come out of the woodwork when the Pacers get the number 1 pick in the draft and say, we should have tanked. See, well, look at the Pacers. They're getting Halliburton back, and that's coming. So let's kill it now. Enjoy all this, and enjoy the fact that if the Celtics can win in the first round, you're going to go scare the living. Nobody wants to play. Pistons don't want to play the Celtics. The Knicks don't want. Nobody wants to see the Celtics in a year that they have to win because the Celtics aren't supposed. You guys aren't even supposed to be here, and now you're going to come in and try to crash our party. And so let the weight be on somebody else, because for the last few years it's been on you, and next year it will be again.
Sean, listen, if I weren't a bigger person, I'd be sitting here and comparing superstars and telling Pacers fans, your guy just doesn't want to be back. Ruled him out before the season even began. How motivated is he to come back and play basketball for your team? The open tank. But listen, we've been going on for a while. I don't want to keep all of us too much longer. But you calling timeout here?
I want to ask one question.
Well, I have two more questions too, but go ahead.
And it's based on what Sean has said on this podcast in the past. And I'm sure it's not the only place he said this. But Sean was very adamant about the Gordon Hayward injury, that they eventually got the best version of Gordon Hayward later, right in that bubble series. They were playing the best basketball they have ever played under Brad Stevens when Gordon Hayward finally got back, and he got hurt in the middle of the bubble and never was the same. John, do you think it's possible they can redo history here and find lightning in a bottle and say, yeah, maybe they weren't the best that they could be, but they put it together for a stretch where they were the best team in basketball because they brought Tatum back, and Tatum was X amount of what it normally is. Is there a possibility of this? Because you were adamant, like at a certain point, the Celtics were playing the best basketball of anybody. That was the best version of the Gordon Hayward version of the Celtics that you could possibly see. They were playing amazing, and then everything went a little haywire. Do you think that's possible?
I think that the Celtics are an extremely dangerous team. I only hesitate to the people who are calling them favorites and whatever, and they have overplayed. The 1 year you're supposed to not have the expectations, they played so outrageously well that they have dragged people who maybe haven't really paid attention to the fact they've done this with Garza and Shireman and a 19-year-old kid that nobody had heard of before the year. And Keita starting. How many of the low expectations were because nobody thought Keita was going to be close to being able to be an NBA center? Right. Mm-hmm. And that was a common theme. Like, Celtic fans should be happy to be wrong about that. It was unrealistic to expect Keita to have the season he had. But now you do have a lot of things, falling into place. The beauty of Tatum coming back last night was that there aren't 3 games left or 5 games left. And I think we tend to think of it because Tatum's back and the end is near in the play. It's not. The schedule is really tough, but you got 20 games to sort of see what you have. And there still could be another wild card in the Eastern Conference. There could be an injury to the Celtics or to the Pistons or whatever stuff we don't know about. I remember doing this interview before opening night in 2017 about how we always think we know things, and then a major injury, something we can't possibly expect happens, and then 5 minutes later, the Gordon Hayward injury changes. So that's why the prediction market is for people who want to be in the prediction market and do prize picks, because I've been around long enough to know crazy stuff happens. That said, you can say on March the 7th that something you couldn't possibly have realistically said in October. The Celtics have a legitimate chance to be a wild card, underdog, long run playoff team. There's no question. They've earned that right.
So the 2 things I have left, I'll start with this one, which relates to this year's Celtics, and we used the word duality before. The duality of the Tatum return versus losing Vucevic for what expects to be around a month. So maybe you get him back just in time for the playoffs, and that would be great. I think a lot of people would say his very brief Celtics tenure to date has been a little underwhelming. There have been flashes, there have been moments, but generally I don't think he's necessarily brought what a lot of people expected he would from Chicago. I mean, hell, I don't know how much Luka Garza necessarily plays in this Tatum return game, if not for the Vucevic injury, and he winds up playing great when he does get in there and impactful and game swinging and all of these things. So over the next few weeks, losing Vooch, how impactful do you think that is? Is this a guy that you have to have for a playoff run?
Well, it's significant. And when it happened, like, the first thing you think of is, well, listen, James Harden had a thumb injury, where guys have had different injuries and they literally didn't miss a game. So you don't know. I hate when it happened and he came out and he didn't come right back out on Friday night. Max and I both, we said it, like, we got a bad feeling about this. This looks bad. I really hate the fact that he doesn't get to play with Tatum here next couple of weeks. I think that was going to be important. And listen, Vucevic was going to be a player. I think it's almost set up that it depends on the matchup. There are going to be nights Vucevic is going to be invaluable. There's going to be nights he's not going to be crazy effective, like when Charlotte is like super athletic and they play super fast. They're not necessarily big. Vucevic is here to play against Jalen Duren. By the way, think about a potential playoff run for the Celtics. It could be Embiid, Towns, Duren. These are all different guys, and you need an experienced big, in there. But what Vucevic was going to be the offensive Al Horford, right? He was going to make things easier offensively with the ball movement and things like that. So if it really does end up being a month, it's always dangerous in the first hours to say, okay, it's like I said before, you say 2 weeks and you say 4 weeks. We don't know. We don't know what we know. We don't know if we're just going to be able to do with that finger a week from now or whatever. But I hate the fact that we don't have a feel for what it messes up the rotations, not knowing what he can and cannot do with Tatum.
I love that you mentioned Horford because that takes me to the other place I wanted to go before we wrap up.
More return videos coming up. We still lead the league. We're going to win a championship in that. That's for sure.
I mean, if Xavier Tillman got one, Lord knows Al's getting yet another one after.
It meant a lot to X. I'll tell you that right now. Just look at his face when he was watching it.
So
I don't think he expected
my whole thing with Horford that I like the fact that he obviously I would have loved if he came back, but I understand the reasons that he's gone in terms of the financials and all of that. I always scoffed going back to the beginning. I thought Boston would have a better season than Golden State. That is documented. That is on record on this show, or at least would have a better chance of winning a championship because there was no universe, even if healthy, in my mind anyway, that Golden State was going to get out of the West. So him saying like, I wanted to go there to try and win a championship, you took the payday, and that's fine. Like, you can do that. You'd like to roll better. That's fine. I don't begrudge him for doing it. I just kind of always mocked it and laughed at it. When he very recently made the comments, though, that there were other external reasons that he left and wouldn't divulge them, but suggested, it's something I'll talk about down the line, but there were, certainly implied it wasn't financial. It wasn't role. It wasn't overall expectations of a team. There was something else. There was something personal that dictated him not coming back to Boston. Do you have any sense of what he was talking about?
I could do the irresponsible thing and guess. I'd rather Al say it for himself, and maybe he's going to say it when he comes to Boston in a couple of weeks. Obviously, it's a topic for that night. But I think that Al's son, and he's got about 28 kids, but he's got a son who's going to be a serious player. Who probably is going to be a professional, is projecting right now, years from now to be a pro. And I think there was an element of wanting to teach him what it is like to be a professional. I think there's an element to that. Maybe that'll be what he ends up talking about at some point. I think of all the great mysteries, I don't think it's one Celtics fan should be losing a lot of sleep over. I don't think there was much circumstance by which Al was going to come back and play here. And I think at the beginning of the year, I know what you're saying. Most people didn't think that. And certainly Boston was really left for dead, like Indiana for this season. And now how many seasons does he have left? So I thought it was a chance for him. And he said it wasn't about money, and that's fine. It wasn't. But isn't it funny? Isn't it ironic that twice Al has left here for what looked to be greener basketball pastures, and both times it has not been close. Swing and a miss.
If before we wrap, would you like to divulge why you have been sipping a drink this entire show?
Sure. There was tequila in this drink.
way back when. Now it is
it's
gone.
Now gone.
He's excited about Jonathan Quick.
So
can't control himself.
Back in the day, Brian Barrett off the pike on the Ringer Spotify. He asked me to be on Game 3. It was Game 3 that Tatum broke, that he snapped his Achilles. Asked me to be on the post-game show for that show. Is it Game 4?
4. Yeah.
4, okay. And I obliged per usual. And I was like, yeah, man, no problem. And not knowing what I was getting myself into. And Tatum goes down, snaps his Achilles, and my whole life is thrown up into flames. And you're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with this? And I told Brian, I said, Brian, I'm going to be drinking tequila this entire show to justify like what I'm doing, to give you what I can give you. And you sip it throughout the entire show, and by the time I got to the end, I was trying to do the Ryan Russillo spin zone of losing Tatum would be good for the Celtics. I was trying to push that in terms of this would be good. Jaylen Brown learned how to be an alpha dog, et cetera, and I drank tequila the entire show. So in honor of Tatum coming back, I did the same thing. I drank tequila the entire duration of the show. And if my answers got a little wonkier throughout the show, that's probably a good reason. But I thought it would be full circle. I talked about this with Adam. I said, hey, I'm going to drink tequila during this entire show. He said full circle. It seems like it makes a lot of sense. And it was more spiritual than anything else. So, look, it's weird because I'm 35, right? And I've seen a decent amount of basketball, not a ton of basketball, but Tatum and Brown are I've watched them grow up as humans, right? So, and they're both younger than me. Tatum's 28, Jalen's 29, but they're in relatively similar age gaps. But I've watched them grow up as men, and I'm very proud of both of them of what they've become over the years. But I have my basketball history is tied very directly to the both of them. And I thought it would be very fitting to kind of full circle it with a little bit of tequila throughout the night. And this entire show was mostly about Tatum and how he was coming back from this devastating thing. And I'm going to take my reporter hat off, or my podcast host hat off for a minute. And man, I can't imagine coming back from that kind of injury. I can't imagine coming back from a point where you listen to him and he's like, I never thought I would come back from this. I didn't think I would be the same guy. I never thought I would play basketball again. And you're like, man, imagine if in your life you did something happened to you where you were questioning whether you would be able to come back the same person you were. I would be a disaster. I'd be a mess. It would take me a good amount of time to come back to the person that I was. And Tatum is supposed to do that like that, right? He gets the surgery next day. He's rehabbing the next day. That's hard. It's hard to come back from a torn Achilles in 298 days is insane. To be a top 5 NBA player that I believe that he was prior to the injury is insane. But he's here. And I just want to commend him for that. I think that's insane. And I'm so how do I put this? I'm so thrilled to be a part of the ride. I'm thrilled to be part of the journey of watching it happen in real time. I'm jealous of Sean, who gets to be there in the building and try and project what's happening in real time. At the same time, I'm just overwhelmed with everything that happened on Friday night. Holy shit, we are here. He's back. He's playing 27 minutes. He's a plus 20. He had almost a triple-double. This is insane. Everything we watched tonight, or I will say Friday night, was insane. And tequila helped me get there. That's all I'm going to tell you. Tequila helped me get from A to B. And I'm
Sean, and you thought your soliloquies were impressive.
I just didn't realize this was an option. I'm going to tell Max. I didn't know you could do that throughout the entire show.
Oh yeah, you can.
I'm going to change the whole dynamic.
We're very
change our dynamic going forward. If he did this,
we're good. Game. We're good with that. Definitely good with that. You could drink Snapple or tequila, either way, no problem.
Yeah. By the end, you might answer some of those questions irresponsibly.
It's possible.
It is. It is possible. That's it.
Oh, good stuff. Yeah, I mean, listen, I won't do the whole monologue of it, but I can remember, obviously I wasn't in the building like Sean, but I can remember sitting on my couch with my kids watching that Tatum injury and just the emotion of boy, and my emotion, I guess more it was more of an overarching fan outlook than it was about Tatum specifically and what is his future. It was just God, next year is going to suck. Next year, I mean, all these years of just, you're in the championship conversation at the very least, entering the year and through the duration of the year for years now. Next year is going to be really hard to watch. It is going to blow. And then the gap year Celtics do what they're doing. And, oh, by the way, Jayson Tatum came back, and it's early March. So it's a pretty remarkable thing, a ride that we all get to go on here.
Listen, everyone forgets Celtics were favored. They were still favored to win the championship until about 30, till Mikal Bridges blocked the Tatum shot.
Yeah.
In the next one game, too. That was the first time anybody even considered the notion. The idea that both the Celtics and Cavs did not make the conference finals last year was inconceivable.
Sure.
Like a day or two before it happened, and everything just happened so fast. And that was why, again, going back to the New York Minute thing popping into my mind, because it just felt like the entire world of the Celtics, the entire dynamic had changed. Like, is this run over? Because you're going to definitely be without Tatum, and who knows what happens on the other side of that. You were already dealing with the tax stuff and being over the second apron, and we knew that was looming, but it went from looming to in the blink of an eye, now it's here. It was like a fast forward. All of a sudden, that brick wall that was in the distance in front of you, all of a sudden was 2 inches in front of your face. And the degree to which the Celtics ran through that brick wall and now have been rejoined by their guy on the other side is a reason to not – it's not a reason to go, now we have to win the championship or else. It's a reason to realize how fragile this whole freaking thing is. And if you don't love every second of this and you can't be in the human moment of enjoying Friday night, then I think you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, if you're a good way to wrap it up, if you, and I would hope nobody out there watching, listening, if anyone is still with us at this point in the program anyway, is in the
championship. I'm not even sure Evan's still with us.
Yeah, Ev is kind of still with us. If anyone is in the championship or bust,
I'm there.
Relates to the Celtics team, you're nuts. But if you're in the camp that the Celtics are in the conversation to win a title, it's a good place to be. It's a lot of fun. So the longtime voice of the Celtics, Sean Grande, kind enough to join us here on the show periodically. We always love having you on, obviously. And as we said, narrating the season, and it's some of the finest, most impressive moments, like what we just witnessed on Friday, albeit with some uncertainty as it surrounds Vucevic's future. But the fact that Jayson Tatum, its superstar player, all due respect, Jaylen Brown, is back on the floor, and we get to watch all of this unfold again over the next several weeks leading into the playoffs starting in mid-April is an exciting thing. So for anyone that missed any of this show, other Celtics podcasts available to you, of course, part of CLNS Media and the network, the Celtics All Access page on YouTube, or you can subscribe to the audio version. If you have been watching the video version, one of my highlights of this show was Sean talking about calling the end of last season and Ev trying to point at him and pointing in the opposite direction. Yeah. That was for me. I enjoyed that. Yeah. but other than
that's when we should have known, by the way, that the tequila had taken the effect. It's like doing the Brady Bunch thing. It's like, no, Marsha's up in that. No.
That was Ev's the gummies have hit moment.
Hey, I know you.
So for Evan, I am Adam. For Sean, thank you so much, sir. We will talk to you again before the playoffs for certain. And great to know that the playoffs are coming in whatever the seed, whatever the schedule looks like. Again, Boston back at it. Sean will be there in Cleveland come Sunday. Early game coupled with daylight savings, as he mentioned, at San Antonio, at Oklahoma City. The good news for those that are already trying to figure out when and how often Jayson Tatum will play, if I'm not mistaken, the rest of the way, I think there are only 2 back-to-backs.
Yep.
So if you want to assume that he's not going to take part in back-to-backs a la Al Horford as he got a little bit older, then, you still got a whole lot of potential Tatum games in front of us to look forward to. So that's exciting. But long rant short, we're done. Thanks for being with us here on Celtics Beat. We'll catch you next time.